All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Give Black, Give Back Conversations. We host this conversation every other month, rather, to talk about and explore the many facets of the Black philanthropy community and how philanthropy impacts us as Black people. But during this month, it's very special. Black Philanthropy Month, we meet every single week. I am your co-host, Kia Jarmon, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-conspirator in philanthropy, Lisa Swift-Young. Let me tell you a little bit about our initiative that Lisa and I founded and serve as the philanthropy advisors for. It's called Give Black, Give Back. Yes, it has the same exact name as our wonderful video cast here. This Black philanthropy initiative is in collaboration with the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, and we have a three-pronged mission. First, we serve as a resource and amplifier for the Black-led funds housed right at the Community Foundation. We also support the efforts of nonprofits that are run by and serve the Black community, and we provide access and education to the community on how to build or sustain philanthropy in order to strengthen our community. And this is the second week of Black Philanthropy Month. In 2011, Dr. Jackie Copeland and her co-architects created this global initiative to celebrate and honor the hundreds of years of legacy Black people across the diaspora have been in their work and giving. For the past 4 years, we've been celebrating here in Nashville, and we're glad that you are with us. We want you to reclaim the word philanthropy. So if you're using volunteer, if you're using mentor, all those are wonderful, and you also should be using philanthropy. If you want more information about the work we're doing, go to blackgivingback.com. So before we get into our topic for today and our guests, let me read a little brief financial disclosure. There are going to be comments that are going to come today from our financial advisors, and they are not reflective of financial advice or their respective institutions, their subsidiaries or affiliates, or any place you know them from. We want to make sure that you just get the information here, but you go to them in their professional capacity to actually get financial advice. Okay, so I wanted to make sure I share that. Let me pass it over to Lisa to share more about our topic and more about our guests.
Welcome, everyone. Again, we are super excited to have two really great guests on today. As our topic is going to be, as noted, is establishing and maintaining a Black family legacy. We have Mitra Sharifi, which I'll give her bio in just a second, and Jarrett Strickland. We're going to talk about real estate investing, children retirement accounts, setting up your financial future. So just all things financial from that standpoint. And so I'm going to start off with just giving you a quick bio on our great guest today. And Mitra Sharifi is better known as the Money Mitra. And she is a money and mindset coach and consultant, financial personal assistant, and personal development educator. She helps people shift their money mindset by only reframing beliefs, but by providing techniques and overcome money trauma. So financial loss, job loss, childhood poverty, growing up, with distant parents, a ton of different things that kind of can happen, along with some tactical money management business strategies. She also has a master's degree in clinical psychology. So a lot of this stuff is going to be based specifically on data, which I love from analysis. But I love her quote as well. Choice is a freedom. Financial freedom gives you the choice to live life on your own terms and create the life you deserve. I think that is, I'm really excited about hearing how she came up with that and just having some conversations. She has a ton of other things that we're going to try to get into right here. She is multi-talented, multifaceted, multi-hyphenated. So we're going to try to get it all in. But in the meantime, gentleman has been waiting patiently over there. So I want to recognize Mr. Jarrett Strickland. He is there. He is the Associate Director and Wealth Planner at UBS Financial Services here in Nashville. He helps leaders evaluate their wealth strategy decisions. So he is literally the money man. So if you want to kind of say it from that standpoint. And for a decade, his career has focused on, his singular focus has been to help his clients thrive by providing thoughtful financial guidance and major life decisions. He strives to try to simplify the process from the complex. People get confused about, like, what's the tax strategy? What's those types of things? How do you build a trust? Is that something that you need to have? I know we've had a lot of stuff in the media about people passing away without wills and trust and that type of thing. And so he's going to sort of help you with those, but we'll show you how to reach out to him later if you have more specific things. But he is a husband and a father. And he's also very active in the community as a board member of the Nashville Entrepreneur Week, the Nashville Business Incubation, and the Food Project. So a ton of things as well, multi-hyphenated, Black man. So yes, that is a thing. And he exemplifies that as well. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And so first of all, we always start off asking people, what is their philanthropy or giving origin story? Mitra, I'm going to kind of go to you. Like, when did this sort of idea of money and giving sort of coalesce for you?
So I would say that one, I came out of school during the financial crisis. I didn't know that was a thing. I was just doing what I thought was the right thing to do, going to have the American dream, the white picket fence. So I went to Vanderbilt, then I got a master's degree, and I couldn't find a job in my field. So that's how I ended up in mortgages. That was my first experience when it came to the financial industry. And I had no experience there. I went back to what I knew, which was not only being a student, but then also being a teacher. And I feel like we can learn from everyone that we come into contact with. So started there, entry level, worked my way up over time into management. And I really found that there was a need for education within our communities. And I really did see the gap in the knowledge when it came to finances, especially amongst, African-American people and the African diaspora. So I really just kind of dug in there. And then there was a time too, I think we always kind of try to find, I guess, power within our own pain. I was getting really just kind of burnt out, like in the industry. And, so being able to connect back with clients that really were getting put to the wayside. I mean, it was Black clients that I was working with, and like no one was able to help them. And if I just kind of took a little bit of a fine-tooth comb and some more time, I was able to help them, with their situation and to put them in a better situation. They were sharing their life story, what they had been through. And, Black people in general, I mean, there's just this sense of strength, of resourcefulness that, I hope people never forget that if we just have a little bit more information and light shed on that, we can really lead to change and to generational wealth. And I think a lot of times we get so caught up in just the money element of it, because to be honest, most people, and even people that have money or first generations with money or people that have it, they still are in survival mode and they don't even really realize that, it's really a mindset, money mindset. We can have money, but still have a scarcity mindset, or we can really start leaning into that abundance mindset, which is really what I hope, to help people bring out the best in how they look at their relationship with money, where their emotions intersect, with their money as well. And that's something that's, really, really important to me too. And I think that also, seeing that not only generational wealth doesn't have to be money and things we pass down, it can be just the knowledge, and it can also just be love. I mean, imagine if we were all able to be raised on love instead of survival. Like, to me, that's like the greatest form of generational wealth, and everything passes down from there.
I love that. Lisa, you're on mute, but I know we're passing to Jarrett. But I want to definitely come back in a moment to talk about love as a generational wealth tool. I really love that. I hope that folks who are watching caught that. But Jarrett, do you want to give some of your background about giving?
Yeah, thank you so much. I would say that for me, it goes back to growing up in the community that I grew up in, East St. Louis, and going to church. And really, my first piece of giving is there at the church, right? You're making your tithes or your donations and giving there. But I remember going to school and teacher doing that whole thing where they ask you what you want to be when you grow up. And, she shot down my basketball dream. But, the other thing I said, I want to be a philanthropist. She was like, that's such a weird thing for like a second grader to say. and understanding how, when you grow up in a particular neighborhood, you see the impacts of scarcity mindset, scarcity of food, scarcity of opportunity and things of that nature. And you think about what you really want to do, which is help your community. I've seen the work that I've been able to do as a financial advisor, working with clients who are impacting communities and hopefully their own communities in a lot of those cases, how it really helps and where it goes to and who it touches. And so I've tried to make that a big piece of my career, is helping people with not only liquidity, not only their longevity, but their legacy, and helping them make sure that they establish what that is, that they have discussions with their family about what they'd like that legacy to be, and that discussion, like Mitra said, is taken across generations and really quantified, so that whether you have the crest like what's behind Kia, you know exactly what this family and our family stands for, and what our community stands for.
That's
Gosh,
awesome. That's really, I really love that whole, I love the idea that but in second grade, you said you philanthropist, and you were on that. So I'm sure you blew her mind, and that's okay. I'm sure we're all about breaking stereotypes, right? Like not fitting in that box, like not. And so, thank you for being, for even pronouncing it at that age.
Right. I was gonna say, especially as a mom who's always trying to help Teddy talk about philanthropy,
Yes.
and he gets through it, but it definitely is a tongue twister.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
We're going to start transcribing these conversations, because I already have a half a page of notes, and we've only been on the line here. But I do want to double click in though, Jarrett, to the second grade philanthropy piece. What showed you that philanthropy was an option? So what is, and I'm asking now to go, so I'm pulling the psychology out here, but what asked you, what presented to you that said, this is an option for me to be a philanthropist?
Yeah, I would say that at that particular time, it was a bit of family, and so I'd ask my mom, hey, look, what are some of the things, what are some of the things that we can do, right? When we're sitting at church, and it's really this visual in my head of, people who are really struggling outside of that church, and the people who have money, or look like they got money, the Cadillacs and nice clothes and hats and things of that nature. And this dichotomy of when you cross the street, or it's just on Sunday, of like this difference that there is, right? This gap that there must be. And some of that's mental health, some of it's, all the things that, attach. But there's a way to make a presence there. And I think I just always talk to my mom around, like, how do you help, what we're seeing and what's happening here. And she brought that up to me. So it's really important to talk to your kids, about it, and get them educated, like you said you're doing with Teddy.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool. So Mitra, just kind of that clinical psychology piece right there. I know you do the money Mitra, and that is you who you are. But how do you combine psychology with your work in finance? Like, how does that, like, that mindset that he's talking about at a really early age, how can someone actually do that? Like it sounds like your mom was way ahead of her, Jarrett. So, as Black mamas are, she was out there. But I want to make sure that other moms have that same thing. And so from a psychology standpoint, how would you say that is a way to start to have a conversation?
I would say one, being in tune with your child's kind of natural interest, while also finding opportunities that align in which they can give back, whether it's, going to a homeless shelter, or, whatever that looks like. Helping, I would say even myself, because my mom was telling me about this recently, but like as a child, like, some kids are just naturally, kind of dialed in and wanting to help other people, or people that are different, maybe, the underdog or things of that nature. And so really kind of tapping into that, because when it comes to philanthropy and giving back, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to, it's not a selfish thing, but there's also a good feeling internally for ourselves. And I think that's really important, to tap into, and to also see, the impact, see that the world is bigger than just us, because, money, which makes the world go round, it's a tool, but it also, it's meant to give back as well. Like, what happens if you just have your money and you put it in the casket with you? I mean, it can have real use in the world. So, showing that to kids that it's not just about, like Jarrett was saying, the material things like the cars and the clothes. That's nice too, and that's fine. But then also, what can we do for others that leaves an imprint, on the world? And, for example, when people become, really wealthy, sometimes people have this mindset, wealthy people are greedy or slimy or things of that nature. And that may be true in some circumstances, but there's also other circumstances where they give a lot of their wealth away. And so, like seeing, Kia's name in the background, Jarmon, and the meaning of that, like when your name is on a building and you're giving something good, like to a university or, a street or whatever that looks like. I mean, giving back into our communities, helping others to thrive, and giving people the opportunity that wouldn't have had that opportunity, without those resources, that really has a lot of meaning and can go a long way. And if parents will think about it in that way, aligned with their children's, unique personality, characteristics and what they're, interested in, then that can really bring that sense of philanthropy out at an early age.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was thinking about, always in these conversations, I'm thinking about my own origin stories, which I think we have lots of origins. We can always start, but I was thinking about that at a young age, I had a savings account, which I still have, the same account, that my parent opened for me. And just taking your kid to the bank and letting them see you write checks, or even when they get old enough, letting them write the checks. I have to give shout out to Courtney Hill. We always try to give him honor here with the money banks, the knowledge banks. And Teddy, my son, has one, and I know hundreds of kids across the city have them, because he's done so much work around that. But having that save, spend, share is really important, so they can see the value, like you said, within their own interests. So Teddy knows he's sharing for people who are in different conditions than him, but he's also saving his money for dinosaurs. So, that's his interest right now. But Lisa, you know what? I wanted to take a second here to just, we talk about philanthropy as time, talent, treasure, truth, or testimony. I want to add some L's to it, to our philanthropy story: liquidity, longevity, legacy, and love. So we have our 5 T's and our 4 L's. I just want to add that in because I think that's a really centerpiece of our conversation we're having here. Jarrett, passing it over to you, talk a little bit more. Pick up from the conversation with Mitra about how you support people in building or thinking about legacy, right? That's such a huge word. And we think about that is you only have to have money. You have to be wealthy to have legacy. That's the perception and not the truth. But give us the everyday conversation around how we can really build or maintain our legacy. Oh, and you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I would say that it really, for me, it starts when I'm working with a client around planning and doing a financial plan, talking with them not only about their money, but who matters most to them. What are the things that they already give to? What are the pieces of in your community that you're already making an impact? Where do you want to make an impact? How do you want your money to work for you? And are is the next generation ready to handle this type of money that you might leave to them, right? And so we talk about that stuff in their financial planning process, and we establish how much money they need to live off of. That's that liquidity side. Like, I got cash to handle the things that I love to do, whether that's now or while I'm working or in retirement. We talk about cash flow. We talk about their longevity, so their overall portfolio, and how we might be able to make sure that they maintain that lifestyle, forever. But we always come back to the fact that you possibly might pass away with more money than you really need it. And so how do you want that money to make an impact? And do you want to make an impact after you pass away, or while you're still living, and giving throughout time periods, there. And so we really dig into what's most important to them, how they want to make an impact, and really helping them align their finances with their passions, their goals, and their values.
Yeah, this is a
That's
master.
yeah, that's amazing. I'm
This
like
is a
taking
master
it
class. I hope you all know what you're getting for, at no
right.
cost here, right? During
No
Black
cost.
History
Right.
Month.
I think that's great. You said so. There's a lot of things in that piece that I think that people, really don't take into consideration. A lot of times they don't think about like what does that mean. I think Mitra mentioned before in that struggle mentality, right? So I'm just trying to make it through today and not really thinking about how to move forward. But I think that has done our community a disservice, right? Because we are finding ourselves repeating some of the same mistakes because there's really wasn't a roadmap to say, okay, what will we do next? Because it's always about what are we going to do right now instead of what's next, right? So I think I definitely appreciate that. And Key and I, we are always very clear about what we sometimes see as charity versus philanthropy. And Jarrett, what you're talking about specifically is around that philanthropy piece. How can you make an impact? And we're talking about a long-term impact. I always go back to the quote, Archbishop Desmond Tutu out of South Africa has a quote. And he's like, we got to stop pulling people from the river. We need to go upstream and figure out why they keep falling in or sometimes get pushed in. And this is philanthropy. This is like, you talked about making an impact, leading with love. Mitra talked about that as well. The longevity of it, like how will this actually build a foundation for our community, our families to actually grow? And so that's where philanthropy and setting up a fund or setting up a structure to be able to do that will actually make that happen. And then the liquidity of like, how do we manage the money? Because that's, it's fine to your point to buy some stuff, but we also need to think about like how we can grow that money and how we can use some of the tools out there to continue to grow that money. So that's really a huge piece. Mitra, so I know from a psychology standpoint, what are some myths you think that Black people pass down about money that are not true that we need to probably just go ahead and put those on the table right now and address those?
So I call those the limiting beliefs that you mentioned early on. And, for example, like money doesn't grow on trees. We hear that one. And okay, technically, which there is a tree called a money tree. Does it have actual dollars on it? No, but I think we have this concept that money is so incredibly hard to make. And that's a mindset shift that has to happen. I've even seen it in myself. Like I remember a time that I was just chained to the desk and people would bring me things. They're like, you should invest in this or invest in that. And I was like, no. And it leads to like, hoarding the money when you could have been working your regular job, earned income. And also that money could have been invested making money while you're sleeping instead of having to feel like you have to grind and hustle. So we talk about this multiple streams of income, but multiple streams of income doesn't always have to be actually working your body and your brain all the time to make the money. I would say actually today, a lot of the jobs that we have, especially like higher level managerial, like there's a certain level of pay, but if you were broken it down hourly, like how often do we take those things home from work, so our brain is running all the time. So if we broke it down on hourly pay, we get paid probably even less than, like someone working in a factory that works, they do their physical labor and then they're done. So thinking, out of the box there, like what are ways, and that's why I think real estate is such a great avenue because you can have that mailbox money, that passive income. Of course, there's the work on the front end, but if you, have a tenant in there, an investment property, and even buying, your first, owner occupied property gives you that ability to live in it for a year, rent it out, rinse and repeat, and build that, generational wealth. I think also, have money for a rainy day. And yes, I think that's a limiting, but then also, no, I think it also, especially for women, because we as women have, this bag lady syndrome where one day we're going to just wake up totally destitute and have nothing. And I think women also just conditioning and programming, when you think about it as a woman, and then put on top of that, being a mother or a future mother, the desire for that, it's like, how will I provide for my children? So that bag lady syndrome makes you feel like you could just have nothing. So when you have that save for a rainy day, it really kind of instills to save your money, but not invest. And, it's almost like investing is like this masculine thing, but it's something that I want to really open up women to as well. And we see that happening, and it's great to really, again, grow your money, have your money working, harder for you. I think also, like we talked about, the people, rich people are greedy, or, we have this religion, I think the church also has this very interesting, element that we look at. And it's like, if a pastor, has designer clothes or a nice car, like he's not deserving or worthy of that, or, that's too flashy for his role. But maybe, but then also maybe is it that, he's blessed and that he's literally that vessel of, from God that's sharing that word. So, really looking beyond, just the surface when it comes to money. And, again, what can money do for you, using it as a tool and not getting so caught up in things that have just been passed down. Because for me, like when I really started looking, I was like, there has to be something here, like regardless of people's races, education, socioeconomic status, like there's some type of psychology of money. And so that's when I dug into that. And me, like working in the mortgage industry and seeing people's credit reports, I was able to see that. And just talking with them, I was like, this goes across everybody. And there's certain patterns that are there. And really the first like 2 to 7 years, that's where our money story, Kia talked about an origin story, but we all have a money story. And in those 2 to 7 years, our conditioning and programming, our download is happening of how we view money, how we interact with money, what emotions we project onto money. And, those, like if there's food insecurity in childhood, or, not enough food, or the lights go out. I have, worked with clients who have made, over 6 figures now, but it's like they still have that fear, or they're not good with money. And a lot of times women too, it's like, and just being honest, I mean, it's like women have low confidence because they've been told that they're not good with money. Like all they do is just shop, and some of us, we might, like to shop, but also what is underneath there? What emotions? Like I really like to, expand the emotional intelligence, and because it's not just the behavior, or just, I guess, the after effect. It's kind of like with addiction. Doctors, they want to treat like what's going on, but really you have to get to the root. What is the source of the pain that is leading to these behaviors? Or like during COVID, so many people were, Amazon, all these subscriptions and everything that you can just push a button and have it sent to your door, or a subscription monthly. We don't think to go check on those, but those things can add up. And it's like, what are we feeling? Are we feeling loneliness? Are we feeling sadness, anger? Like what's at the root that is driving those behaviors that leads to that cycle where now we're having those beliefs that we're telling ourselves, like, I'm not good with money, or why would I keep letting this happen? Kind of like when you were saying, like pulling people out the river versus, why are they falling in the first place? So getting to the root of those things is really important in our belief system.
Whew. Because what you just said, Mitra, that last piece about what are we feeling, which is emotion, and then what are we feeling, which is like stuffing ourselves with something, right? So there's both, and what at the root are we trying to accommodate, whether it's an emotion or whether it's an actual something that we're compensating for. That's a real question that I hope could be a guiding question for folks today, as they think about, as they're spending, as they are having those limiting beliefs about what they can and can't do. You spoke to real estate, and I'll let both of you speak to this in just a moment, but you spoke to real estate being one of those mailbox money tools. Jarrett, what are some other I don't want to say mailbox money because I don't want people to just make it sound like so passive, but what are other things that people can do outside of just going to work every day that will allow them to either get to the mailbox money or get to adding more layers to their money story?
Well, great question. I'd say mailbox money. It is passive income, right? So that's what we, in technical terms, we say how are you getting that passive income? And the question is, there are several ways that we've seen in America to become a millionaire, billionaire, whatever. And a lot of those things includes starting a business. So starting some type of business that's on the side of maybe the work that you do, where you can hire, you can build a product that you can scale up so you can hire people to help you distribute and make sales or do whatever that business does. So we see that. And I see that a lot with small business owners or folks who started a side hustle that has changed into their full hustle. Secondly, I would say that really starting to invest. Really, I'm trying not to go dead into investing, right away, but investing in real estate, like Mitra talked about. So buying and flipping, buying and holding and renting out. Um, Depending on what you feel like, real estate is the second way in America we've seen people become millionaires, and a great way to get passive income. On that same line of investing, it's investing in the stock market and in the bond market, and it's really about having a balance key of each one of those investment spots of what you're doing. It's whether it's business entrepreneurship and business ownership, um, real estate investing, and financial instruments investing as well. And so if you can achieve that balance, and some people find the balance is not equal balance, right? I'm either leading with my real estate or leading with my business, or I'm leading with my investments. And so it's just dependent on where you are and what kind of fits for you and your goals. That a decent touch on that?
Well, okay, so we keep talking about real estate, and I know that people are like, I just can't afford, I don't have the ability, I can't see that happen. As someone who has put their toe in understanding, I can say it is overwhelming at best, or maybe at least it's overwhelming. So I understand that it can be challenging, but I'll go to Mitra first, but Jarrett, you feel free to pick up. Talk about real estate. We always hear that as like a tool or an instrument we can use, but how realistic is that for people, particularly Black folks? How can they go about starting the real estate journey?
So I would say that we should, one, discuss it from the basic level of ownership and home ownership, buying, being a first-time home buyer. This is really the big gap in wealth comes from let's call it what it was, redlining that impacted Black people. There's a 30% gap in home ownership. The average, white home ownership is at 73%, Black home ownership is at 42%. If you're really looking at the numbers, Black home ownership is growing much more in comparison to any other racial group, but still there's just that huge gap. And again, it's the lack of education, the lack of knowledge, the feeling of overwhelm, and rightfully so. If I didn't do mortgages, I would be like, what is this hieroglyphics Greek that's being spoken right now? So trying to break it down into something that's more simple and more palatable. Also, I think there's a fear because, one, let's also be honest and transparent, home values have gone up, which means that the purchase price or the acquisition cost is much higher. So I think even for people that are like, oh, this is just so out of reach, like we talk about generational wealth, but this boat has sailed. Even to take a step back, I'm thinking out of the box every day in creative ways. Like if there's a single mother that wants to buy a home, hourly income, I can't buy a home in Nashville or Davidson County at this amount. Then what could we do? Could we somehow, maybe find, another single mom that we like with children and buy that first home together? Look more at group economics. If it's something that we really want, sometimes we're going to have to do it in a little bit of a different way than maybe what we thought. And two people coming together, just the way, marriage, it's two incomes and there's benefits there. Sometimes it's two non-married people coming together and buying something, holding that for a year, turning that or two, whether they, because in 2 years you can sell something right now and pay no capital gains. And that can be now that down payment. Now you have that nest egg, that generational wealth. But you thought, oh, I couldn't do it. Now, there are also down payment assistance programs that are out there, different forms, shapes of that, where you can get in for, little to nothing. For example, we can use, THDA, Tennessee Housing Department Authority, their max purchase price is $375,000, but right now they give up to 6% towards down payment and closing costs. That means that you could get in with very little to nothing, down payment and closing costs. So if you don't have the knowledge and you don't have, someone to connect you to these type of programs, then it can seem really far away because, like Lisa asked about limited beliefs, like when we talk about buying a home, most people are like, don't I have to have 20% down to buy a home? No, you don't, but that's just that conditioning. It's what we've been taught. So it makes it, and by the time, and if we're listening to, and I'm, there's great things as well, but like Dave Ramsey, how long would we be waiting to save that 20%? Let's be honest, in Black families, Black communities, there's a lot more student loan debt. We can't be naive to that, because if you don't have parents that can afford to send you to school, or if you don't have parents that can gift you a down payment, which most Black families, that's not the case, then we have to use these instruments. And this is where, I mean, again, having that knowledge and saying, okay, I can get this home with little to no down. That's how you get in and you get started. And it just takes, again, having that knowledge. Another thing that, and I wrote this down because you asked about limiting beliefs. We in the Black community often think like, well, no one handed it to me, so I want my kids to work for it and they need to struggle too. Let's start to eliminate that struggle, because I'm telling you, like, we really need to start normalizing, if we do have the resources, why not? Now, at the end of the day, it's everyone's personal choice. But like Jarrett was saying, if you are going to have more resources when you pass away, I mean, why would you not want to? Because in other communities, that's what's happening. People come together, they do group economics, they're helping each other out. They're laying that foundation so that people don't have to struggle. The quicker we can get people out of survival mode, the quicker they can start lifting as they climb and helping others. And it just becomes, a totally different trajectory. And we have to start normalizing luxury, knowing that all people, that Black people, we all are worthy of having the things that we desire. And like I said, home ownership is the biggest vehicle to wealth in America. So when we have a group that is, way behind, we're not doing enough to bridge that gap. And so that's where, that is something that's very passionate to me, because I've seen it, in real life, and it matters. It matters a lot. And it's a big part of the legacy that we're talking about. I mean, if you can leave a home, there are kids now, well, they're not kids now, but they're inheriting these properties, and that gives them their own bank. Like, your home is your own bank. As you pay it down and as it appreciates in equity, you can do a cash out refi if you want. You can do a line of credit. Now you don't have to go to the bank and worry about, do I need to send some, I'm this Black person, they're not going to give me the loan, because those are real things that have happened. You have your own bank sitting there that you can borrow money from. And that's power. That's being in a position of power. And we need to really, push that narrative and change the narrative there for sure.
I love everything you said. From that standpoint, I think, I'm taking notes and kind of going with it. And one of the things in particular, Kia and I talk about, we're talking about giving back, but a lot of times it's that getting that stability. And so some people will, the conversation around, getting a property is like, it's too much. And you've already dispelled those myths from that standpoint. But one of the things to think about, and I know Jarrett mentioned that before, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that building that wealth needs that stability. One of the things in particular that people have to remember is that when you get a mortgage, your mortgage will stay the same for the next 15 to 30 years, depending on how you structure it, right? And so there's some stability associated with that, where you have a place to live at this particular rate, and that it may be, it's a lot of times it's less than what you're paying right now. If you're renting here in Nashville, it's probably less than what you're paying right now. And so that whole upstart part is maybe the challenge, but ultimately that's better. Now, I will say this as my husband and I flipped some homes back in the day, and we've sold all of our properties from that standpoint. But I know for a fact, and I have friends who've done this, and you guys can chime in as well. I don't know anybody who's ever lowered rent. It's actually not a thing. And so when you're talking about stability for a long term, you have people who bought a house 25 years ago who are still paying $1,500 or $1,000. And if you were to move into their neighborhood today and rent a place, I'm going to say you probably in the $3,000 range. And that's going to continue to go up, but they're going to continue to stay at the same. So any money they get, anything that they do, you're going to think about that. And that's money they have access to. And so Jarrett in particular, you talked about something in particular that I love. I don't know if you guys have read the book, The 4 Pivots, Dr. Sean Jenwright. He is a professor out in California, and he talks about this concept of from hustle to flow, right? That whole conversation around, always hustling and from the flow. And I know, Jarrett, because you deal with wealth, in that flow piece, give us some information about trust and like some of the things that people who have money, those people that we say are not doing it, but they're using that leverage, that money in between, that what we're paying for rent and they're paying for a mortgage, and they're using that to actually continue to grow. So that gap is even getting bigger. So Jarrett, I mean, I know Kia asked you a question, but I'm going to just jump on you to sort of give us some really good information.
Yeah, so I'd say it's really about, and I'll touch on a couple of things. It starts with communication, right? Whether it's if you're married or whether you're married or not, right? Communicating with your family, your elders, your parents, your kids, your spouse, those around you who you really care about. It starts with that. What I see a lot of are the really wealthy families when they want to make sure that their kids and their whole family's engaged in the whole process, right? Of what our money does. They're having family meetings. And in those family meetings, talking about their values, talking about their goals, talking about what we should be doing together. That so that when you do have that surplus, right? So you've had these communications, you wrote down what your goals are, what you're supposed to be doing for your family, where your money should be flowing to, right? And not just through. Really looking at when you do have that surplus, how will it impact your family, right? And what will it do? And having a goal for it. Because if you don't think it's going to have an impact, right, on your life, you're not going to do it. You're not going to make those investments. And nobody invests in something that they don't believe in. And do you believe in yourself and in your family, right? Is the real key question. And so to move towards your question, Lisa, heavily, what we're seeing is, it's doing the basics and doing the basics well, right? Saving and investing, setting aside whether it's monthly or quarterly, what you're going to save for yourself, paying yourself first, right? You've heard that kind of statement before, but making sure that you're a line item on your budget, and making those investments, whether it's into a Roth IRA or 401k, the basic stuff, or maybe starting a brokerage account and putting it in, investing your money that way. Make sure you have that emergency fund of some sort so that you don't go dipping into your investments for emergencies. But if you do those basics well, right, it's just like in any activity, you can start to go out and do extra things. So making sure that, all right, if I'm getting my match in my 401k and I'm putting money in my Roth IRA, putting a little money in my brokerage account, maybe I'm starting to max out my 401k a little bit. I do want to buy that house. I could take one of the areas I could find liquidity from is taking a loan from my 401k to help purchase the put down the down payment of that house, right? So we were talking about that home ownership access. How do you get access to your money in order to make sure that you can make future investments? Once you have that house, like Mitra said, using that equity to buy another property. When you buy that property, maybe you sold it and you held it for a while, but then you end up selling it. How do you keep the taxes down on your profits from that sale? Do you distribute it to another property, and go through that process of buying another property within 90 days? Or do you open up a charitable remainder trust, where you sell the property to the trust sells it, and they don't pay taxes because your charitable remainder trust sold the property. You don't pay taxes, on a portion of that profit. And so, and then that's money that you can take a distribution from for your lifetime. And then at your passing, it goes on to a charity in which you've named in the trust, a beneficiary that you named in the trust. So, those types of things. The same thing goes for owning and selling a business. So you started a business, you scaled it, and if one of the reasons to start a business, one of the main reasons to start a business is to sell a business, right? And that's sometimes where your biggest asset comes from. And so you sold your business. Do you take all the money to yourself, or do you start that charitable remainder trust to distribute a bit of money for you to give and do planned giving over your lifetime, while also reducing your tax load? So at a certain point, taxes become a hindrance to you as you started to earn and grow. And so, you can give the money away in some of these tools and trust, but still have control of the assets to distribute when and how you want to, but also to fund your lifestyle. So those are two kind of areas that you see folks really looking at. And I'll kind of leave it there.
So I want to dial into this. I want to make sure people are really understand. So Jarrett, thank you for sort of giving that explanation. So what I want people to understand that these people who are wealthy are giving away money they never even earned. That you guys, I mean, like they didn't have to earn it. That was like from leveraging, like you can give more if you have some stability. And so that piece in particular, and giving money away to avoid paying taxes, which ultimately, so like they're
Reduce.
They was gonna say they may not like that word.
Reduce.
Tax
Reduce
reductions.
Reduce.
Adherence. That would avoid them.
Adherence. Reduce paying taxes.
We're going to pay. We're
going to pay. We're going to pay a lot less. So my point being is that, I think the thing is that we have to remember as a community, these are strategies. So people talk about giving money away. Here's the thing, and we didn't start this off, and we always have this conversation. African Americans in this country give $11 billion away a year.
And that's 2/3 of households. 2/3 of not all, but just 2/3 of Black households give $11 billion.
So we're giving the money away. But what we're not doing is giving it in a way where we can reduce some of our tax burdens, and we're giving away money that we didn't have to actually go out there and trade dollars for hours for. So when we're talking about philanthropy, this is a strategy. It is about feeling, to your point, feeling good, but also filling the coffers so that our community can go on for generations as well. So, feeling FEEEELING, and then filling FILLING to be able to help that as well. And so when we talk about philanthropy, this is really a strategy that people who have money are continuing to pass money down that they didn't earn technically, because they just wait to the market, did certain things, and they sold off part of it. They reduced their tax burden so they had more money to give. And then they gave money away to their kids or their family members, reducing their tax burden again to give more money. So there's some really good strategies around philanthropy and why you should become a philanthropist, because what a lot of that $11 billion is charity, which is good, but it's not actually helping us to get out of those situations. Another thing that we talk about, and I talk about in my TED Talk, is specifically charity is helping someone in their situation. Philanthropy is helping them out of the situation. So we want to make sure that you guys are really getting this shift, this money mindset shift that Jarrett and Mitra are talking about. Is really about that concept. So I am taking notes and getting stuff down, lots of quotes. And again, we're going to transcribe this, and I'm sure you guys will see this later somewhere.
It's already on Facebook on Community Foundation, and I see the folks watching. So thank you for tuning in. Jarrett, were you going to jump in?
Got a question on that. 11, was it 11 million or 11 billion?
11 billion.
11 billion with a B. On that 11 billion, how much of that is going to churches? Was that a factor in there?
So this is the Kellogg Foundation Institute.
Okay.
We have a link. So this is sort of just an overall. They break it down. A large part of that goes to obviously religious institutions specifically. And so, breaking it down, you can get the whole study if you want to take a look at it, and it kind of says that. But we are the most philanthropic demographic in the US. By those numbers, we're the most philanthropic, and obviously and we still have the wealth gap, right? So we're still talking about where we make significantly less than our white counterparts, but proportionally we give away more. The challenge is that we're not strategic in how we're doing it. And so it is making us feel FEEL better, but we're not filling for our next community. I don't know who said that, but I wrote it down. You'll probably hear me say it.
Yeah. That's what listen, I got a whole lot of sermons over here. But to Lisa's point, Black individuals give 25% more than our white counterparts. The amount is different, right? Because our ability to have disposable income is different, but we give 25% more. It is churches, because those are nonprofits. So when you look at, what's a nonprofit, it's art institutions, it's schools. And so we give, if you think about just how you give to what you're passionate about. So what are the areas that we're passionate about in the Black community? Our faith, which is very foundational to us, our education, because we hadn't had access to it for so long, our ability to express and emote art and culture. So those are the areas you're going to see that show up as the top areas that we give to, which gives me a moment to say, this is my plug for churches. I'm continuing to ask you, please put on your tithe and offering document, if you'll put in philanthropy, it will help people understand that what they're doing is sowing into the greater community. Philanthropy has been, the wording has not been of access to us, but the actions we've been doing since before we came here, pre-colonial Africa, since we came here on through the slave trade, and of course, all throughout the diaspora in not just America, but all across the world. So it's important that we continue to tell that story, amplify that. I want to give, before we, I have some more questions, but I just want to make sure people heard some stuff, okay? One, and I'm taking notes because I was like, ooh, we're doing some of this stuff, so I felt good about it. Family meetings, where are your values? And so you all, the point out of the crest, I designed that for my family this year with lots of input from my family, and we announced it at our family reunion. And because we were planning the family reunion, we've been meeting very frequently, and we've continued to meet. And it's really been helpful to have conversations about what's the bank account doing and where do we want the money to go. And we've developed a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name. And so having those conversations really does help you get real clear about talking about money. Because that piece of like just getting it out to say, what does it cost? How much are we getting from it? What's the percentage? Like getting really, really explicit. So family meetings, I heard that as one of the strategies that we need to be using. Even if you have $0 today, having the conversation about your family values and where you want your money to go. Group economics, I heard that, and asking the question, who do I trust to be innovative with? And again, I'm thinking about that with a girlfriend. We've been talking about what real estate could look like if we both went into it. And so that's a real, I think, important piece of, we've got to trust each other more, because that's one of those limiting beliefs, is that we can't do things together. We can never do things. And we know that's not true, because we are communal people. We've been doing stuff for each other, with each other for a long time. And then the third thing I heard was about leveraging what you already are doing. So do you know where your money is? Do you know the subscriptions you have? What should you be canceling? Do you have a place that automatically withdraws into your brokerage account? So I heard some of that about just knowing where your money currently is so that you can create a plan. I just want to make sure people heard those three things. I've heard much more, but three things that help them with their financial strategy. I have a question. I wanted to go back to the point Mitra was making about kind of innovative or creative financing or ways to build up and leverage. Are there other tools? And of course, we just heard about the group economics with purchasing real estate with, multiple people or one other person. And we also heard about the trust. Are there other tools that we should be using that are either creative or that we're just not aware of? I want to put it in the context of either one. And I'll let either one of you answer, Mitra or Jarrett.
I'll jump in just real quick and say, one key piece is just being creative. I think the one thing that I think we've missed in this conversation, especially about real estate, is having a mentor. It'd be nice to have somebody who's on your side, even if they're not in the deal with you, talking to you about, parts of the things that you need to think about. What's your communication with the bank? What's your relationship like there? What's your relationship with the folks doing the work if you need work done on the property? All the different pieces of maintaining it. Having that mentor there and available to you would be helpful. And a lot of that just comes from talking about what your dreams are, talking about writing down what your goals are, and talking to people you trust about it. So I think that's a key piece, finding that mentor or partner in there, looking at different avenues of money you've already saved and how you can leverage it. Maybe you have a life insurance policy, or money in a brokerage account. You can lend off of the assets in your brokerage account with a lot of firms if you have a certain amount of money, up to 70% of what you have invested. You can we call that security-backed lending, is another way to kind of to see that in this pandemic where you saw the housing market kind of just kick up and a lot of purchases with cash. That's what we were seeing a lot of because of, over the last decade and a half, the stock market's gone crazy since the financial crisis, and we've seen a lot of equity holdings that people are leveraging so I got $1 million in the bank. I can get up to 70% of that, use it for a down payment, or to just flat out purchase the house for my kid, right? You're seeing a lot of that. But what we can do, folks who are trying to get up there to that point, it's really, putting them saving, for that goal that you have, find the right lender to that really works with you on, like Mitra said a couple of times, getting a lower down payment, the terms of the deal and things that you need, and then finding partners if you need to, setting up an LLC, you and a couple of folks. So somebody might have the money, somebody's got the manpower. So can you do some of the work if you don't have all the money? Can you be the person to track down, paying the insurance and make sure the note gets paid on time, all that kind of stuff, the management. And finding that partner, and sometimes it's that mentor that we talked about at the beginning, who might be able to throw, X amount of money into the deal for a portion of it until you can kind of get on your own feet and do the project yourself.
That's so good. Mitra, you have any thoughts of creative things or just things we just don't know about how to leverage what we have or how to do better with what we can have?
So there are loans out there that, there's hard money loans. I think that for first-time home buyers, you could be getting a little bit over your head. You just need to make sure you have the knowledge and resource, but that's more so for like investors and things of that nature. There's actually something called, renovation loans, which are actually like traditional mortgages, Fannie, Freddie, 203K through FHA, that allows you to get money to actually finance, your renovation. Or like he said, there's so many other tools. I loved earlier how he said, a 401k, because a lot of times you can take out from your 401k and you're not even paying interest on it. It's something that you can actually utilize to purchase, a first time home loan. Also, a lot of people I talk to, because I think we are in the information or the age of information, which is great, but it can also be too much. We get, overly extended, overly immersed in all this information. It's like, what do I even believe? So people be like, oh, I want to buy land. I heard I should buy land. Okay, but it's like we have to decide what is our strategy and where are we starting. And land does require a much larger, down payment. So I think that that's something that once you get that house and build that equity, then venturing into something like that. I remember having a conversation with someone and they heard it somewhere. So it's just kind of dialing in on those things. Also, because I think the concern is like affording the mortgage. So not only like, how can we get into a property, and like I said, the ones that are on the lower price point, they may need some work. So can you do some DIY through YouTube? There's a lot of information out there on that. Or can you find trusted contractors? On the other side of it, how can you supplement your mortgage? And that could be one, renting out rooms individually if you're not using all those rooms. Someone living in, Davidson County area, they may rent a room for, who knows, $800,000. That could be a big chunk of that mortgage. And now you're, everyone's winning in that scenario if they need to be closer to work or in the hospitality industry or something like that. Also, Airbnb is something, even renting out a room or renting it out to supplement income if you're out of town, 1 weekend a month. It can be very lucrative in that sense as well. And I think people also, he was talking about stocks and whatnot. People, maybe it's kind of down right now, but, people made some money on crypto. People were taking it into there. There's just so many different ways, to skin the cat, but you also don't want to get in a position. You have to realize that if you're using borrowed money, there's a huge risk there as well. So always, do your own research. And one thing that Jarrett said earlier that I think, we have to consider, because he's like, do people have basically the right mindset that if they do inherit money? Because I've seen people inherit money and unfortunately, like it was squandered. They had all these great ideas of what to do, but then they woke up one day and they're like, where did it all go? Or they, used it on a business or something of that nature. And, some of the things that are traumatizing when it comes to money is like disinheritance in the form of when parents maybe their children's life choices they didn't agree with, so they don't want to leave them something. I remember even like within my own family, it's like, how do parents, or the grandparents, my grandparents, like make decisions of who they leave things to? Is it someone that they feel like is the most responsible? Do they want to divide it equally? Does all that weight fall onto one person? They should have followed the gut of who they should have seen to oversee it, but then that person doesn't want, the emotions and feelings of everyone else. It's a lot, it's heavy. And so that's where, when Jarrett said that earlier, I had taken a note of it, because I was like, that's something to really truly, think about. Some people may just have a better knack for, the financial part, or have did more self-education. And I think those family meetings are a huge component of that, so that everyone, can be on the same page as much as possible. And you can kind of get a gauge as to where people are in their financial intelligence, because that really is going to dictate also what happens to your legacy, does it end there, or can it go for further generations as well?
And I'd say a part of that, just picking up where you were just said, is, giving people different roles, right? So maybe your role is with the money, right? Your role might be with somebody else's role might be with the house or the property that I own, the things that I want to give away. Somebody's got that charitable mindset. Maybe they need to go out and look for places where, we do give money away, who are the right people. And so everybody in the family's probably got some strength that you can leverage to keep pushing the family forward. It's really about having those times, like you were talking about, Kia, for your family reunion, taking that time to step back and out of the mud of the everyday struggle that we have to really plan together.
Right. And not coming together just for funerals, but literally coming together for meetings,
Absolutely. You get a chance
that-
to see
yeah,
people
go ahead.
differently. Well, I want to say you get a chance to see people differently when it's not just around, like you said, a funeral or something that is tragic, because certainly we all have experienced what death, what transition can do to a family. And so when you have the habit of family meetings prior to that, then you can lean into what people's kind of natural resolve is versus what happens when panic sets in. So certainly, I think that's really great advice that Jarrett gave about having those continual meetings. You might not even be talking about money, but just decision making. And then that way, you know exactly where to go when the decisions are ready to be made. Lisa, you have a couple of last questions before we get out of here.
So just really a question and comment from that standpoint. I think that is something that something you can do right now. We're going to ask you guys to sort of queue up for, what is one thing that people can do? And then we're going to ask how people can find you. Because I have a feeling that a lot of people have a lot of questions that they need some professional help with. And so this is why Mitra and Jarrett are here today. In particular, but I will say that, one of the things that you can do, and when we talk about at the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, is setting up a donor advised fund. And that's a way to leverage as well. And it's not as expensive as you think. We can put the link in there. I think Kelly's in the background. Kelly Wahlberg is our VP of communications over there. There's an FAQ, and it talks specifically about how you can set up a fund. And it's not as expensive as you think. We are here to dispel all the myths of people who have funds out there. We have also on the blackgivingback.com site, you can see over 40 plus funds that are Black-led funds. So if you're a Black person thinking Black people don't have funds, yes, they do. And they're right here in Nashville, and you can see who they are, what they're giving to, what their intentionality for legacy is around. And so you can begin to have that conversation. I will say that my family has a fund there as well, Change We Seek. And Jarrett kind of hit it right on the head. Everybody in the family has, and I say my family, meaning my husband and my 2 adult children, everyone has a role and everybody has a responsibility to how we manage that fund. And that creates a conversation of us around how we handle money. So as my husband and I are having conversations, we're kind of seeing where our children are and kind of like maybe giving them some direction. Also, and really be honest, sometimes learning a lot from them as well about how they see money. So it's a really, really great way. So if you are interested in doing a donor advised fund and having your own family foundation, it is not as expensive. Audra Cox also is on the background as well. She can talk to you a little bit about that. So I want to make sure people are aware that these are things that Black people do this. Like, we do we do have foundations, we do have funds, we have nonprofits as well, but we also have funds that we can give money. And so I want to change that paradigm and bust that myth as well, that we are philanthropists in the traditional sense that we've always thought philanthropists are. And that is what we do in particular. So Mitra, I'm going to start with you. Just one thing somebody can do today to say, I'm going to build my legacy in something that will make the difference, and then let them know how to find you if they have other questions.
I would say today is really just set some time. I know we talk about like, self-care, meditation and things of that nature, but just really have some self-awareness and just think about your own thoughts around money. Like, what is the foundation of your money mindset? And me just being transparent, for me, I was afraid of making mistakes. I was the schoolgirl that, really got a lot of value and pat on the back, I guess, for making good grades. So it's like, I didn't want to see any red marks, everything had to be a certain way. And, that perfectionism, also that people pleasing, like what is the cost of that? Even hearing, how, and not, I don't want to say it's like a good or a bad thing, but like the amount that we give, why is it that people that have the least give the most? Like what's underneath there, that martyrdom, that sense of, having to give, even, and especially in Black communities, as, there's people are moving up in their income, but you have survivor's remorse or survivor's guilt, where I'm the one that made it. And you feel like you have to give back. So then now you have very little. You need that disposable income. You need to be able to put that mask on yourself and then be able to help more people. So just, again, having that awareness, that insight, so that you can really, have the legacy that you desire and keep it going, for generations. And sometimes that means being a little bit, selfish, if people want to, but really, you're being and being selfless, because you'll be able to give so much more back by making sure that your needs are taken care of, first and foremost.
Right.
And then, yes, if you would like to find me, you can email me at moneymindsetmitra, MITRA @gmail.com. And I also have a website, moneymindsetmitra.com. You can go there for more information as well. I'm on Facebook and Instagram too. Money Mitra, you can find me there.
Awesome. Jarrett, how about you?
Yeah, I'd say that it starts with making sure that you have a plan. So one thing I'd say is make sure that you're asking yourself, am I planning for my family and what I want for my legacy to be, both living and in your passing. And then I got 5 questions for you to ask yourself, and that's what do you want to accomplish in your life? Who are the people that matter most to you? What do you want your legacy to be? What are your main concerns? And how do you plan to achieve your life's vision, right? So we call those 5 questions part of our UBS Wealth Way, and really how we set the planning focus for the work that we do with folks. And what I find is when people are able to sit down and answer those questions and take a shot at it, it really starts to ground you in, how does my money have an impact on these things, my goals, my legacy, the people I care about, the communities that I care about. And so I think that if you did anything, sitting down and answering those 5 questions, and talking to someone, whether it's a partner, an ally, a mentor, or an advisor, about it. You can reach me, Jarrett, JARRETT.Strickland @ubs.com, Jarrett.Strickland@ubs.com. I think I'm Jarrett Strickland on Instagram, but it's really just pictures of my kid. But feel free to reach out to me, 615-750-8022.
Awesome. And I know that Kelly will get all of that in the chat, because I've been following along, and it's been great to get all of your thoughts and all your nuggets, more than my hand could scribble and write. One of the things, Mitra, just really quickly, that I was thinking about when you mentioned why we give so much, is it this kind of martyrdom that we're doing? And it makes me think about how we sometimes will over tip. I'm a great tipper, by the way, at restaurants. I'm going to always do 18+%, because that's the appropriate thing as a former person who's worked in that. But also sometimes we over tip, because we're really trying to make sure that people know, like, we are going to dispel myths of some sort. And so that really makes me think about how we have to really change our money mindset in order to change our behavior. So my suggestion is to do what Mitra talked about first, sitting down, thinking about your mindset, thinking about the myths. I call them the lies my mom told me. It's not just your mom, but it's anybody in your life who told you something that was there to protect you, but also now is not necessarily appropriate. So what are those things that you are continuing to hold about money? And then you can move to part 2, which is what Jarrett is talking about, which is really sitting down and writing the plan that adapts to the new mindset that you want to have. So I'm really encouraging that. Lisa, do you have any last points before we take us home?
I do not. I want to thank you guys so much for the great conversation, around money specifically. I know that's one thing, people think of philanthropy, they only talk about money, but we don't. We talk about the 5 T's. And so this is really about, thank you for your time today. One of the 5 T's specifically, we talked about treasures. Your talents are obviously well on display. You guys can go read their bios from that standpoint. And this is the truth. I think we're giving the truth and the testimonies of how other people have done it, how we're doing it. So it is all of those things specifically. And so I want to thank you guys around that piece. And I really encourage everyone to really seriously consider doing those 1-2 steps, right? That Kia just named out, is really get that mindset right. We've got to really have these discussions. I would like to have more discussions like this. And so if either one of you guys want to engage in this, we will definitely have an offline conversation about it. And then that communication, I think Jarrett, a really good point of really having these conversations about how we not only, first of all, put your mask on first, and how do you want to save your family? How do you want to dispel the myths from there? And that again takes you out to the community, and that leaves you to, now that you're armed with this information, we're not asking. So this is what we talk about with philanthropy. We're not asking Black folks to give any more money. So we're not asking you to reach in your pocket anymore. What we're asking you to do is be more intentional about it. And we're asking you to say, take that $11 billion. If we're intentional, I'm going to say when we're intentional, and our goal is that we are intentional with that money, the power that we have, that we already hold, will change the world. And so we just really want people to really think about how that intentionality is that mind shift change of how do I look at things differently? How do I have communications? How do we open up those conversations? That'll take a look at how you're giving money right now. Like, where are you giving? Where are you over tipping? Where are you doing this? Where are you doing that? And maybe take a catalog of that. If you funnel that into a foundation or something to actually fix a problem, instead of just, sort of make you feel good in the moment, this would be a different country. This country would definitely be different. So I ask that people, seriously consider taking on that challenge as we, we're closing out 22. It's time for resolutions. And I think I'll say this: August is a month of new beginnings for those of you who attend church. Know that's been quoted this month. And so this is the month to make that happen. So I'm not even gonna say wait, I'm gonna say make that happen right now. So thanks.
Very good. As we talked about liquidity, as we talked about longevity, as we talked about legacy, I hope that you also experienced love in this conversation. That's where we come from. At the core of this, and what I heard both of our guests talk about is wrapping this up in changing our behavior, changing our mind, changing our behavior, and changing the way we love each other. And we'll get a much different outcome and experience. If you want to know more about Give Black, Give Back, go to blackgivingback.com. We have all the information there for you to set up a fund, for you to have a conversation with us, for you to share your own story, your money story, your philanthropy story, for you to learn about our Black-led funds or our Black-led nonprofits. We have a plethora of information. Please join there. We also are back with you next week, next Thursday on August the 18th, to have another dynamic conversation around, again, our theme for the month is fierce urgency of now. So all of these conversations are about how do we do something now to impact future generations. Thank you so much for being with us. This is Give Black, Give Back Conversations, and don't forget to give Black.